Welcome to today's lecture. Today we will be doing a lightning overview of the Lagrange multiplier method in convex optimization. We will not be dealing with any details or any specific and going into too many details of the Lagrange multiplier method, but we will just make it so that we have a working knowledge and understanding of the whole method and what is going on behind the scenes. So first we start with the definition of convex sets. So formally speaking, a convex set is a subset of a vector space uh, such that for all x comma y, for all points in the set, this condition is true. So informally what it means that if we have a set S, then if we take 2 points x and y in the set, and if I join these 2 points with a line, then all the points on the line, they belong to the set S. Okay, so this the linear equation that we have for t between 0 and 1, it basically means that it is representing the line joining the 2 points x and y. If we have t is equal to 0, for example, if we have t is equal to 0, then we will get the point y. If we have t is equal to 1, then we get the point x. So this is an example of a set that is not convex. If we take 2 points x and y here, then if I join these 2 points by a straight line, there are so many points that do not belong to this set. It is important to know that uh, the property that we have, that the line joining the 2 points should be true for all points x and y, because here we will have some points x1 and y1 which satisfies this property, but we want this property to be true for all points x and y. Okay. Next, we move on to the definition of convex functions. The convex functions, I mean, the definition is kind of an extension of the definition that we have for convex set. We can best explain the definition by drawing a simple plot. So let's say if this is my function f, and if we take 2 points x and y, okay, then on if we look at the argument of the left hand side, we have tx plus 1 minus ty. It means that some point in between x and y. So let us suppose that we consider this point, and this point is tx plus 1 minus t of y. Okay. Now we are interested in the value of the function at this point. So this point is our left hand side, f of tx plus 1 minus ty. Okay. Then if we look at the right hand side, we want f of x is a point here. So this point is f of x, and this point here is f of y. So we are looking at a line that joins f of x and f of y on the curve. So this point is f of x and this point is f of y. So if we join these two, so this is the line that we will get. So intuitively, what the definition of a convex function means is that if we look at the graph of the function and we connect 2 points of this graph by a straight line, then this line is always above the graph. Okay, so this was the line that we formed by joining the 2 points. This line is always above the graph. So this is what the intuition of a convex function is. So I think it is clear. Next, we discuss, we will not be particularly using the concept of alpha sublevel sets, but it is just good to know. That is why we have it in the set. So alpha sublevel sets, we can denote it by S of alpha. They are basically points in the domain of the function g, any function g, such that the value of the function is less than alpha. Okay. So if we have to look at it for a convex function, then if we have, let's say, alpha here, okay, So then this set, because we want to look at the domain, then this set will be S of alpha. Okay, it should be parameterized by G. I mean, G should also be a parameter because it depends on G as well. But yeah, but for our understanding, it is an observation that we have is that if G is a convex function, then all alpha sublevel sets are convex. The converse, however, is not true. Okay, because we have several non-convex function for which all alpha sublevel sets are convex. Okay, so when we say convex set, we are looking at the domain of the function. So if this was a function G, its domain is the x-axis. So we are looking at the domain of a function. This is an example of a it is not convex, but still its alpha sublevel sets are all convex. For example, if we consider these three values, then the alpha sublevel sets that we get are something like this. Okay, so we call such functions quasi-convex functions. Okay, so this particular function, let's say G prime is not convex. However, its alpha sublevel sets are all convex for different values of alpha. If we have alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, we keep on drawing the points. Such functions are called quasi-convex functions. And there are other functions as well, which are neither convex nor quasi-convex. I mean, we can look at a function like this. All right. Let's say if this is our function, this is x-axis and this is y-axis. If we draw a line alpha here, then the alpha sublevel set, it basically has these two intervals. Okay, so this is the sublevel set. I mean, the union of these two intervals, yeah, is the sublevel set corresponding to the value of alpha, and it is easy to see that these two, I mean, this interval is not convex, because if we take 2 points and then we join, I think you get the idea. We will not explicitly be using alpha sublevel sets for our analysis that we are going to discuss today, but it is just good to know. There is another related concept which we call as an epigraph. If you are interested, you can look it up on the internet. It is a well established concept and there are several resources. Epigraph is generally used to prove stuff if we encounter with any, but it's okay if we do not discuss it right now. Okay, so now that we have discussed convex sets and then we moved on to convex function, so we now define a convex optimization problem. Okay, the convex optimization problem is a constrained optimization problem, may or may not be, but the main idea is that the standard form it minimizes a function f which is convex and subject to constraints that are also convex. So here f and gi are all convex. For all I, f is convex and gi is also convex. Uh, in the standard form, we have represented the constraint as an inequality. However, in several cases, we might also have equality constraints such that hj is equal to 0. We can always replace this equality constraint using two inequality constraints. One is hj less than or equal to 0 and the other is minus. Okay, so there is a mistake here because we want so it should have been hj greater than or equal to 0 or minus hj. No, I think this is correct. Okay, all right. So what was written is correct. Hj less than or equal to 0 or minus hj less than or equal to 0. Okay, correct. So, but the problem here is that the only situation in which minus hj and hj both are convex if h is a linear function. Okay, these are just other things. And the most important observation that we have and why convex optimization is so popular is because any local minimum is also a global minimum. So as long as if we look at it from a standard maximizing or a minimizing perspective, If we take the derivative and equate it to zero, solve the equation and do all those things, we will get a global minimum. Okay, we will not have multiple minima. In several applications, whether we, if we want to find out the point that we have reached, if it is a global minimum or it is a local minimum, then if the problem is convex, then we have a guarantee. We will not look into the proof for this, but the idea is basically that if we have two minimas, let's say, then the function is not convex. Okay, when we join these 2 points, the graph is above the line. So this is the intuitive idea, but yeah, we'll not look at the proof. We'll just remember that any local minimum is also a global minimum. Okay, next we look into solving the convex optimization problem. We are looking for a recipe, or we are looking for a hammer that we can use as a tool to solve several problems. And one of the methods is the Lagrange multiplier method. Before going into the Lagrange multiplier method, just some basics of, we'll just revise some basics of what is a gradient. So if we have a function f, the gradient of f is the partial. So f is a function rd to r. Okay, so it has d dimensions, d independent variables x1 to xd. So the gradient is just the vector of partials with respect to each of the independent variables. Okay, one thing to note here is that the gradient points in the direction of maximal increase. Okay, we will shortly see why it is important, why this makes sense. But before going to that particular discussion, let us see what gradient actually means. What we are doing here is that dou f by dou x1 basically tells what happens to f if I change x1 by just a little small amount. Okay, this the second entry dou f by dou x2, it tells us what happens if I change x2 by a small amount. What happens to the function f if I change x2 by the small amount? So the gradient function is basically telling us what happens in each of the dimensions. What happens to the function f if I change each of these dimensions by a small amount. Okay, so gradient basically uh, in describes the change that happens to a function f when we change the independent variables x1 to xt. Okay, so to see how it makes sense, the statement that we have given, that the gradient points in the direction of maximal increase, let us suppose v is the direction of maximal increase. Okay, and if we take the uh, dot product of the gradient with this vector, what we get is cos theta. Okay, why are we taking the dot product? Because nabla, this function is called, this symbol is called nabla, because the gradient of f tells us what happens when we change it. And if v is the direction of maximal increase, so we want to find how much change occurs or something like that. Okay, the whole idea is that this the right hand side is maximized when theta is equal to 0. Okay, so cos theta becomes 1. So gradient and v, they point in the same direction. This is just a very hand wavy uh, argument of telling, of claiming the proof, sorry, proving the claim that gradient points in the direction of maximum increase. Okay, so before tackling the Lagrange multiplier method in its full glory, as we have been doing throughout, I mean, in all our development, we'll do it step by step. Okay, so the first step is to consider only the equality constraint. So this is the convex optimization with equality constraint. We have a function f, we have a function g. Both f and g are convex. Otherwise, it will not be a convex optimization problem. The first observation that we have is that for any point x on the surface on the surface of gx equal to 0, the gradient nabla gx is orthogonal to the surface. Okay, this is not just valid for gx equal to 0, but it is valid for any gx equal to c. So we are basically talking about the level curves. Okay. Now, one intuition says that, I mean, why this is true? The intuition says that if we want to change g, then we need to move away from gx equal to 0. Okay, and the gradient is the direction of maximum increase. Okay, so that is why g of x is perpendicular. But we can also see this by Taylor series. Suppose if this is the surface gx equal to 0, and let us consider a point x. If we draw a tangent at x, all right, and like we do if we expand gx plus delta x using Taylor series, then we will get something like uh, this. Okay, plus higher order terms. Okay, so this is gradient of g and delta x is the change. So we are moving just by a small amount along the curve. Now, since this is a level curve, if we move by a small amount along the curve, then delta gx plus x, sorry, g of x plus delta x should be equal to g of x, because this is a level curve where the value of g is same throughout. So these two terms, they cancel out, and what we are left with is delta x equal to 0. So this happens. Uh, so this means that gradient of g is perpendicular to the tangent. Okay, so gradient of g is perpendicular uh, to the tangent. It means that it is perpendicular to the surface. Another thing to note here is that since g is convex, we will have curves something like this. So this can be g is equal to -1, and we can have another curve. This is gx equal to +1. Okay, since gradient points in the direction of maximal increase, that is why we are saying that it points sort of outwards. All right, but it points in the direction of increase, so it cannot point inwards because then gx will decrease. So it points in the direction of increase. Another observation is that at the optimal point, a gradient of f is orthogonal to g equals 0. Okay, so this makes sense. So gradient of f can point is in this direction, or the gradient of f can point in the opposite direction also. We do not know in which direction exactly it will point. The main idea is that if it does not point in the orthogonal direction, okay, suppose it points somewhere here, okay, then we can resolve this particular gradient, this particular direction in two components. First is tangential to g and the other is perpendicular to g. Now if we move in this along g, then we can further decrease f. Not exactly, because this is the direction of increase, we'll move up in the opposite direction. So basically the idea is that we can move along gx to further decrease f. So that is why at the optimal point, if we denote the optimal point by x star, then at the optimal point, gradient of f is orthogonal to the surface gx equals to 0. Okay, so using these two observations, we can combine these two observations uh, to get something like this. Okay, so what we have from observation 1 and observation 2 is that gradient of f and gradient of g both are orthogonal to the surface of gx equal to 0. Now if they are orthogonal to the surface, then it means that uh, gradient of f plus nu, we introduce a new variable nu. Okay, new variable nu, such that a gradient of f plus nu del nabla or gradient of g equal to 0. Okay, so if they point in the opposite direction, then accordingly the sign of nu will change, whether they point in the same direction or in the opposite direction. Now we relatively formalize these two observations. We define a new function. We define a function L, which is called the Lagrangian, and we define it as fx plus nu of gx. Okay. We had two conditions. The first condition in our original optimization problem, if you remember, the first condition, the first was the consequence of the two observation, was that the gradients should be parallel to each other. Now, if we take the derivative with respect to x, then this is what we will get. Okay, so if we take derivative or with respect to f, then we get gradient of f plus nu gradient of g. So this should be equal to 0. So this we get here. And the second point is that we have to satisfy the constraint. So if we have to satisfy the constraint, then if we take the gradient with respect to nu, since f does not depend on nu, what we are left with is gx equal to 0. Okay, so these two conditions can be represented in terms of one single function, that is the Lagrangian function. Next, we just look at one small example. This is our f, this is our g. Now, if we have to write the Lagrangian equation, we will do it in this way. Okay, this becomes our Lagrangian. Now, if we have to find with the gradient with respect to L, we get something, we will get something like this. Okay, so we have two equations here, 2x1 plus nu equal to 0 and 2x2 plus nu equal to 0. If we take the gradient, so we have x1 plus x2 equal to 1. You can verify that the solution to this is that x1 is equal to x2 is equal to 0.5. We will also get nu is equal to minus 0.5 is. Okay, so this is the solution. So we had this, yeah. So this was just a very pedantic or a very simple example. What we often deal with in actual applications are slightly more complicated than this. Okay, so after being done with the equality constraints, we move on to the case of inequality constraint. So we have gx less than or equal to 0, where f and g are convex. Okay, so for inequality constraint, we have two cases. The first one is when the constraints are active, and the second one is the case when the constraints are inactive. Okay, so what we mean by active constraint is that if we have g, let's say, so g is a constraint that is actually uh, constraining the system from not reaching the optimal of the unconstrained problem. Okay, so if we had the optimization unconstrained optimization problem of minimize f of x for all x, then we would have reached some x star. Okay, but because of this constraint, uh, we are not able to reach that x star because mm, this is the boundary. Okay, so we had gx less than or equal to 0. This was the boundary because of which we cannot reach towards x star. Okay, so uh, our optimal will lie on the boundary. Our optimal will lie on the boundary because we want to be as informally or intuitively speaking as close to x star as possible. So this is what active constraint mean. So the optimal point is on the surface gx is equal to 0. So an active constraint basically is the case of the analysis is similar to what we did for the equality constraints. So in this case, the gradient of f and gradient of g are parallel at x star. I mean, it's the same thing that we saw earlier. However, gradient points inwards. If you remember, when we did the equality constraints, we said that gradient can point outward as well, and gradient point can point inward as well. So when we say outward, inward, we meant something like 0, and we will have gx is equal to -1, let's say. So outward inward means something like this. So if you see, now if the gradient of f is pointing inward, it means that when, okay, so let's say g, and we have gradient of f here. So if the gradient of f is pointing inwards, it means that if we move inside the constraint, that is, if we decrease the value of gx, we move to gx is equal to -1, then the value of f, it increases. Okay, but our objective is to minimize the value of f. Therefore, we yes, I mean, so that is the main idea. Okay, so gradient of f, because if the constraint is active, then it means that if we move inside, then the value of f increases. But since we want to minimize it, we will not move inside, and the gradient in this case will point outwards. Sorry. The gradient in this case will point inward, and we will stay at the boundary. Okay, I think this is clear. Just think about it. If spend some time with it, and you will understand. So the constraint that we had in when we discussed equality constraint, we had something like this. But since here we have a fixed direction of grad f, the constraint reduces to this specific form, where we have lambda greater than 0. In the equality constraint case, we did not have any restriction on nu. It could have been any real number. So this is the case of active constraint. Next, we move to the case of inactive constraint. So the inactive constraint is, I mean, we have gx equal to 0, and the value will lie somewhere here. So let's say g of x star. So when we substitute x star, so it behaves as if the constraint does not exist. So it is not, uh, let's say, let us just as represent it as g2, and we can consider all of this as g1. Okay, because this was an active constraint. Okay, so even if we remove the constraint, the solution of the optimization problem will not change. So this constraint is not active. So it is not actively constraining the solution to the problem. That is why it is the inactive constraint. So the only condition that we will have for this case is that grad of f will be equal to 0. The gradient of f will be equal to 0 at the optimal point. So this becomes like a standard unconstrained optimization problem that we do. Now we can combine both the cases. The first case that we had for the active constraint, and the second that we had for the inactive constraint. Okay. So for the active constraint part, as we already saw, these two, so we form a Lagrangian. Okay. But in the equality constraint case, we did not have any constraint on mu. Here we need that lambda should be greater than or equal to 0. For the active constraint case, we have those same things. So if we differentiate with respect to x, then it should be 0. If we differentiate with respect to lambda, it should be 0. However, lambda should be greater than 0. If we have inactive constraint, then for inactive constraint, L of x comma lambda is essentially f of x. Okay, because g of x, it is as if g of x does not exist. So when we take a derivative with respect to lambda, it is trivially true because L does not have a lambda parameter in it, so it is trivially true. Or we can say that it has lambda, but lambda is equal to 0, and we need gradient of x uh, of L with respect to x to be 0 because of this condition. Okay, so what we basically mean to say is that when we look at an optimization problem, we do not know which is an active constraint and which is an inactive constraint. So these two equations, they say that okay, even if we do not know, what we need to do is these. What we need to do, it does not change. We need to take the gradient with respect to, we need to form a Lagrangian, take a gradient with respect to x, take gradient with respect to lambda, equate them to 0, find the solution such that lambda can only be greater than 0, it can only be, or it can be equal to 0. Okay, lambda does not have a negative value. And for whichever constraint, whatever lambda comes up. Okay, so normally if there are multiple constraints, we will have lambda 1, lambda 2, and of that sort. So whatever lambda works for whichever constraint, we will do it in that way. So you can look at several examples. There are many books on convex optimization. The most popular one, as per my sample space, what I have talked to people, the most popular one is by Stephen Boyd. One thing is that another observation, coming back to our discussion, another observation is that lambda of gx star is equal to 0. Okay, for both cases, if we have active constraint, then lambda is greater than 0. However, for active constraint, lambda greater than 0 but g equal to 0. For inactive constraint, lambda is equal to 0, g is don't care. Okay, so in both cases, lambda g x star is equal to 0. If you are interested, you can read about Karush Kuhn Tucker conditions. It is a very popular, uh, yeah, I mean, it's a very popular term where in seminars people just talk about KKT conditions, KKT conditions. KKT conditions are just what we have discussed here, but it would be written more formally in the textbook. So if you want, you can read about KKT conditions. We will finish the lecture with a small example. So we want to find the value of x and y. So this is area of a rectangle, and this is a constraint on its perimeter. Okay, this is a very simple example that we have an area of a rectangle. So we will first convert it into standard form. Standard form is that of minimization. Okay, so 2x plus 2y minus 1 less than or equal to 0. Then our Lagrangian for this case will be minus xy plus lambda 2x plus 2y minus 1. Then if we do dou L by dou x, we get minus y plus 2 lambda. Dou L by dou y will be minus x plus 2 lambda, and dou L by dou lambda will be 2x plus 2y minus 1. Okay? All of this will be 0. We'll equate this to 0, and when we solve this, you can verify that this is the value that we obtain. Okay, so that concludes our discussion on Lagrange multiplier. So this was just to give you a working knowledge of what multipliers are all about. If you want to know more, you can read any of the textbooks.